An hour ago, a car salesman looked at my fat body, looked at my simple clothes, and announced to the entire showroom that I was just there to take pictures for my social media because I could never afford to actually buy anything. An hour later, his terrified manager personally handed me the keys to the most expensive car on the floor after I paid for it in full, with a wire transfer that made his jaw hit the polished marble floor. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Maya. I'm 30 years old, and my story today is a little different. It's not about a slow, multi-year revenge plot. It's about a quick, brutal, and deeply satisfying counterpunch delivered in real time. It's a story about the ugly, everyday prejudice that fat people face, and the glorious, beautiful power of having screw-you money. This is a story I almost couldn't wait to tell you, because the humiliation was so raw, so public, and so incredibly infuriating. It's the kind of moment that so many of us have experienced in some form. You walk into a high-end store, a nice restaurant, a luxury dealership, and you feel the shift in the air. You feel the eyes on you. The quick, dismissive scan that takes in your body, your clothes, and instantly calculates your worth and finds it wanting. You are judged, found guilty of being poor, and sentenced to be ignored, all in the space of 3 seconds. His words, "Fat people just want to take pictures, they can't afford it," weren't just an insult. They were a verdict on my entire existence. He didn't see a successful software engineer, a savvy investor, a woman who had worked her ass off to build a life of financial independence. He saw a stereotype. He saw a fat girl in a hoodie, and his small, prejudiced mind could only compute one thing: she doesn't belong here. For a moment, that old, familiar shame washed over me. The voice of every bully, every judgmental relative, every person who had ever made me feel small, rose up in a chorus in my head. You start to question yourself. Do I look poor? Is my body an advertisement for failure? Do I deserve this condescending public humiliation just because I'm not wearing a designer suit? And the weight of all that past judgment almost makes you believe it. But this is not a story about how I slunk out of that showroom in shame. This is the story of what happens when a person's prejudice collides with a fat girl's hard-earned bank account. It's about the moment I decided to stop absorbing the world's judgment and start making the world pay for it, literally. This is the story of how I took a man's ugly, classist, fat-phobic assumption and turned it into the biggest, most humiliating commission he never got to make. The journey to this moment was years in the making. It was years of late nights, of teaching myself to code, of navigating the brutal, male-dominated world of tech, of making smart, risky investments. It was years of quiet, disciplined, behind-the-scenes work. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for my own freedom. But, oh my gosh, when the opportunity for a little taste of revenge presents itself on a silver platter, let me tell you, it is delicious. I just know, that so many of you have been on the receiving end of that look. The look of disdain from a sales associate, the condescending tone of a waiter, the silent judgment of a world that equates your size with your social status. I see you. I've been you. And I'm telling you this story as a fantasy fulfilled. Before we go back to that beautiful, gleaming showroom of prejudice, I need to ask you for your support. If you've ever dreamed of a moment like this, if you've ever felt the sting of being underestimated, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the fuel in my new, very expensive engine. It's a powerful message that we are a community that is building our own worth on our own terms. It gives me the courage to share every glorious, satisfying, high-octane detail. Okay, buckle up, darling. Let's go back to an hour ago, to a man who was about to learn a very expensive lesson about assumptions. To understand why today's events were so deeply, deliciously satisfying, you need to understand the woman who walked into that car dealership. That woman was forged in years of quiet, nerdy, and relentless hard work. My story doesn't start with a dramatic heartbreak or a public family shaming. It starts in a quiet, cluttered bedroom in front of a glowing computer screen. I've always been a fat girl, and I've always been a nerd. The two things in my mind were inextricably linked. The world outside my bedroom, the world of high school parties, of team sports, of social hierarchies, was not built for me. So I built my own world, a world made of code. I was the kid who spent her weekends learning Python instead of going to the mall. I found a sense of power and control in the clean, undeniable logic of programming that I never felt in the messy, judgmental world of human interaction. My body might have been soft and undisciplined in the eyes of the world, but in the world of code, my mind was a sharp, powerful, and elegant machine. Food was my fuel for those long, obsessive coding sessions, a comforting and reliable companion that never judged my syntax. This path led me to a degree in computer science, and then into the heart of the tech industry. It was a brutal, male-dominated world, and I was an anomaly in every sense. I was often the only woman in the room, and I was always the only fat person. I learned early on that to be taken seriously, I had to be not just good, but exceptional. I had to be faster, smarter, and more innovative than every single one of the tech bros in their identical hoodies and expensive sneakers. The main antagonist of my story wasn't a single person, but the pervasive, condescending bro culture of the industry, embodied perfectly by the man I'm about to introduce you to. But first, my supporter. He wasn't a mentor or a family member. He was a character, a legend in the open source community, a reclusive and brilliant programmer known only by his online handle, Archon. He was famous for his elegant, minimalist code and his brutally honest, no-nonsense feedback on developer forums. He was my hero. I was a young, terrified coder working on my first major open-source project. I had been stuck on a complex problem for weeks, and in a moment of desperate courage, I posted a question on a forum where Archon was known to frequent. I was sure I would be ignored or, worse, flamed for my ignorance. A day later, a reply appeared. It was from him. It was not gentle. "Your entire approach is wrong," he wrote. "You're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The architecture is clumsy. Think simpler. The most powerful solution is always the most elegant one." But then he did something I never expected. He posted 3 lines of his own code, a small, perfect, elegant solution to the problem that had been tormenting me for a month. It was like watching a grandmaster solve a complex chess problem in a single, beautiful move. And then he added one final line. "You have a good mind for logic. Don't clutter it up with unnecessary complexity. Keep it clean." Those words became my mantra. Keep it clean. He hadn't seen a girl or a fat person. He had seen a mind. He had seen my code. And he had respected it enough to be honest with me. His validation, coming from the anonymous, meritocratic world of open source, meant more to me than any promotion or pat on the back ever could. It was the first time I truly understood that in the right world, my mind was the only thing that mattered. Armed with that new confidence, I started to thrive. I became one of the top engineers at my startup. But I was also quiet, and I was a woman, and I was fat. So while my code was powering the company's success, the promotions, the raises, the public recognition always seemed to go to the loud, confident, charming men on the sales and marketing teams. And the worst of them, the king of the tech bros, was a man named Josh. Josh was our head of sales. He was the kind of guy who was good at his job because he was a master of superficial charm. He was handsome, athletic, and radiated an aura of effortless success. He treated the engineers, especially me, with a kind of benevolent condescension, as if we were the nerdy, uncool trolls who lived in the basement, keeping the lights on so that he, the handsome hero, could go out and slay dragons. He would often come over to my desk, lean over my shoulder, a little too close, and say things like, "Hey Maya, the big-brained genius. Can you work your magic and make this feature happen for me? I've got a huge client I need to impress." He thought he was complimenting me, but the subtext was always clear. You're the smart fat girl in the back room. Your job is to make me, the handsome face of the company, look good. I endured it because I loved the work. And because I was playing a long game. I knew the real money in tech wasn't in the salary. It was in the equity. I was one of the first employees at the startup, and I had a significant number of stock options. For 5 years, I kept my head down. I wrote my clean, elegant code. And I waited. I was betting on the company's success. On the day our little startup would be acquired by one of the big players. That day came 2 years ago. Our company was acquired for a jaw-dropping sum of money. And my stock options, which had been just a piece of paper in a drawer for years, suddenly became worth a life-changing amount of money. Overnight, I went from a well-paid but overlooked engineer to a multi-millionaire. I didn't change my life dramatically. I quit my job, yes. I was done with the corporate world, with the Joshs of the world. But I didn't buy a mansion or a yacht. I kept my comfortable apartment. I kept my simple, comfortable clothes. And I finally, gave myself the freedom to work on what I loved. My own projects, my own investments, my own quiet, nerdy, and now incredibly well-funded life. Which brings us to today. My one big, glorious, and utterly uncharacteristic splurge. For my 30th birthday, I decided to buy myself the one thing I had secretly dreamed of since I was a little girl. A ridiculously fast, beautifully engineered, and unapologetically loud Italian sports car. It wasn't about showing off. It was a tribute to the part of me that loved elegant, powerful, well-designed machine. It was a toy, a beautiful piece of engineering that I, as a fellow engineer, could deeply appreciate. I had spent months researching. I had chosen the exact model, the exact color. I had already arranged the wire transfer with my bank. All I had to do was walk into the dealership, write the check, and drive away. So I put on my usual outfit, a comfortable worn-out hoodie from a tech conference, a pair of jeans, and my favorite sneakers. I didn't dress up. Why would I? I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there as a customer, a cash buyer, to complete a simple transaction. I was about to learn that in the world of high-end luxury, a world I had never cared to enter, my comfortable, authentic self was not a welcome customer. I was about to walk into a showroom and meet the physical embodiment of every condescending, superficial, judgmental bro I had ever had to endure in my career. I was about to meet the car salesman who would become the star of his own worst ever day at work. Walking into the luxury car dealership was like stepping onto a different planet. It wasn't just a showroom, it was a temple. A vast, white, minimalist temple dedicated to the worship of speed, wealth, and status. The floors were polished white marble that reflected the perfect gallery-style lighting. The cars, each one a masterpiece of engineering and design, were spaced far apart, like priceless sculptures in a museum. The air was silent, save for the quiet, reverent hum of the air conditioning and the faint, expensive smell of leather and Italian espresso. I stood just inside the massive glass doors for a moment, feeling a flicker of my old familiar social anxiety. I was a nerd in a temple of cool. I was wearing a 5-year-old hoodie in a room where the tire treads were probably worth more than my entire wardrobe. I took a deep breath. You belong here, I told myself. You have the money. You are a customer. I started to wander through the showroom, my eyes drinking in the beautiful machines. The sleek lines, the powerful engines visible through glass panels, the intricate details of the carbon fiber. As an engineer, I was in heaven. I wasn't just looking at cars, I was admiring the art of the possible. I saw the car I had come for. A stunning, low-slung sports car in a deep, iridescent midnight blue. It was even more beautiful in person. I walked around it, my heart beating a little faster. I peered through the window at the handcrafted leather interior, the beautiful, complex dashboard. I was completely lost in my own world of appreciation. That's when I felt the eyes on me. I looked up and saw him. He was walking towards me, but not with the eager, welcoming gait of a salesman approaching a potential customer. He was walking with the slow, deliberate, predatory saunter of a security guard approaching a loiterer. He was the physical embodiment of every superficial value I had spent my life rejecting. He was handsome in a generic, forgettable way, with perfectly coiffed hair, a blindingly white smile, and a suit that was just a little too tight, a little too shiny. He wore a gold watch that was clearly meant to be noticed. His name tag, pinned to his lapel, read Chad. Of course it did. He didn't greet me. He just stopped a few feet away, his arms crossed, a look of profound, bored annoyance on his face. He looked me up and down, his eyes taking in my hoodie, my jeans, my comfortable sneakers, my fat body. And in that single sweeping glance, he tried, convicted, and sentenced me in the court of his own small-minded prejudice. "Can I help you?" he asked, and the words were not an offer of assistance. They were a challenge, a demand for me to justify my presence in his sacred space. "Yes, thank you," I said, my voice polite and friendly. "I'm interested in this model, the GT 850. I was hoping I could take a closer look." Chad's perfectly sculpted lips curled into a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. "A closer look," he repeated, his voice dripping with a condescending amusement. He took a step closer, not to me but to the car, placing a proprietary hand on its gleaming hood, as if to protect it from my unworthy gaze. "This is a very special machine," he said, his voice taking on the tone of a serious piece of engineering for serious collectors. "I know," I said, my politeness starting to fray at the edges. "I've read the specs, the twin-turbo V12, the carbon ceramic brakes, the 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. It's a masterpiece." My technical knowledge seemed to surprise him, and for a moment, his smug facade faltered. But he recovered quickly. "Right," he said, his smirk returning. "Well, as you can imagine, we don't just let people take a closer look. This isn't a toy store." The humiliation was beginning, a slow, familiar burn in my cheeks. I could feel the eyes of the other salespeople in the showroom on us. I could see 2 other well-dressed, wealthy-looking customers watching our little drama unfold with quiet, curious expressions. I was becoming a spectacle. But I persisted. I was here to buy a car, and I was not going to be deterred by this walking cliché of a salesman. "I understand that," I said, my voice now a little colder. "I'm a serious buyer. I'd like to sit in it if that's possible." And that's when he laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was a short, sharp, ugly huff of a laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated derision. He looked me up and down one more time, his gaze lingering on my stomach, my hips, with open, undisguised contempt. "Sit in it," he said, his voice now laced with a sweet, venomous pity. "Honey, let's be realistic." He leaned in, as if sharing a secret, but his voice was pitched just loud enough for the other customers to hear. "First of all," he said, "I'm not sure you'd fit." The word hung in the air, a physical blow. He had just, in a room full of strangers, called me too fat to sit in a car. The shame was so hot, so absolute, it was like a physical flashbang going off in my head. My vision swam. The beautiful, gleaming cars around me seemed to mock me. But he wasn't done. He was enjoying this. He was performing for the other customers, for his colleagues, establishing his dominance as the gatekeeper of this temple of wealth and thinness. "And second of all," he continued, his voice rising, taking on a tone of public service, of a man trying to educate the ignorant masses. He gestured around the pristine showroom. "This is a place of business, a place for serious clients. We're not a tourist attraction for people like you." And then came the final, fatal, and utterly infuriating blow. He looked directly at me, a look of profound, condescending annoyance on his face, as if I were a particularly persistent insect he was about to swat. Fat people just want to take pictures, they can't afford it, he announced, his voice ringing out in the quiet, cavernous showroom. I see it all the time. You come in, you waste our time, you get your little selfie for your Instagram, and then you go home to your sad little life. So, unless you're planning on writing a check, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The silence in the showroom was absolute. It was a perfect, crystalline, and utterly humiliating silence. Every single person in that room was now staring at me. The other customers, the other salespeople, the receptionist at the front desk. I was the star of my own, unplanned, public shaming. His words were a perfect storm of every prejudice I had ever faced. The fat phobia, the classism, the assumption that my body was a direct reflection of my bank account. He had looked at me and seen a poor, pathetic fat girl, so desperate for a taste of a life she could never have that she had to steal a picture of it. He had not just insulted me, he had written a whole, pathetic backstory for me, and had presented it as fact. I froze. For a single, terrible moment, I was 15 again. I was the girl in the high school auditorium, frozen in the spotlight, the sound of laughter roaring in my ears. The old, familiar instinct to flee, to run, to disappear, surged through me. My face was on fire. My heart was a frantic, terrified bird, beating against the cage of my ribs. But then, something else kicked in. Something new. It was the quiet, cold, logical mind of the engineer, the investor, the woman who had spent years training herself to be calm under pressure. And it was the voice of Archon, my anonymous mentor, whispering in my head, the most powerful solution is always the most elegant one. Running away was not an elegant solution. How? Crying was not an elegant solution. Yelling at this pathetic, preening peacock of a man was not an elegant solution. A strange, icy calm washed over me. The shaking stopped. The roaring in my ears faded. I looked at Chad, at his smug, triumphant face, and I smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was a slow, cold, and deeply dangerous smile. The smile of a shark that has just spotted a particularly stupid, slow-moving seal. A check? I asked, my voice a quiet, clear, and perfectly steady murmur that cut through the silence of the showroom. That's a little old-fashioned, don't you think? I reached into the pocket of my hoodie, and I pulled out my phone. I held it up. I prefer a wire transfer, I said. It's cleaner. Chad just stared at me, a look of profound, arrogant confusion on his face. He thought I was bluffing. He thought this was part of my pathetic little performance. I ignored him. I let my gaze sweep over the other salespeople, who were all watching, frozen, from a distance. Excuse me, I said, my voice ringing out, clear and commanding. Could I please speak to the showroom manager? I'd like to make a purchase. A man in a better suit, an older man with a panicked look on his face, quickly scurried over. I'm the manager, he said, his voice a nervous squeak. Is there a problem here? Not at all, I said, my smile never wavering. Your employee, Chad, was just helping me. He's informed me that this car, I patted the hood, the midnight blue GT 850, is for serious buyers only. And I am a very serious buyer. I turned my cool, calm gaze to the manager. I'll take it, I said. This one. The floor model. I'd like to pay in full and drive it home today. The manager's jaw dropped. Chad's face, which had been a mask of smug arrogance, was now a kaleidoscope of confusion, disbelief, and a dawning, sickening horror. Pay in full? The manager stammered. Yes, I said. I looked at the price sticker on the window, a number with a truly obscene amount of zeros. The price is $575,000 plus taxes and fees. Just give me your dealership's account information, and I'll wire the funds right now. My bank is already aware of the transaction. I have never, in my entire life, witnessed a more beautiful moment of pure, unadulterated, karmic chaos. The manager was stammering, his face pale. The other salespeople were whispering frantically. And Chad. Oh, poor, pathetic Chad. All the color had drained from his perfectly tanned face. He looked like he was going to be physically ill. He was staring at me, at my old hoodie, at my phone, as if I had just performed a magic trick. He was watching the biggest commission of his entire life, a commission he had just personally, publicly, and arrogantly thrown into a dumpster fire, go up in smoke. Of course, miss, of course, the manager said, finally finding his voice, his tone now a symphony of obsequious, groveling panic. Right this way. We'll get the paperwork started immediately. He started to lead me towards a glass-walled office, but I didn't move. I just stood there, my calm, cold smile still in place. There's just one more thing, I said, my voice a quiet, silken thread of pure steel. The manager froze, his face a mask of terror, clearly expecting me to soothe him into oblivion. I turned my gaze back to Chad, who was now trying to blend into the marble columns to disappear. Your employee, Chad, was so incredibly helpful, I said, my voice dripping with a sweet, deadly irony. So knowledgeable. But I think he must be very, very busy. Far too busy to be bogged down with the paperwork for a sale to a person like me. I looked back at the manager. So, I will be completing this transaction with you. And with you only. Chad is not to be involved. He is not to receive a single red cent of the commission on this sale. Is that understood? The manager just nodded, his head bobbing up and down like a puppet. Yes, miss, absolutely. Understood. Good, I said. And then, for the final, beautiful, elegant coup de grace, I added, and when the transaction is complete and the car is ready, you, personally, will be the one to hand me the keys. Right here, in the middle of the showroom. I let my gaze sweep over the room one last time, meeting the shocked, awed eyes of the other customers and staff. The show was over. The fat girl had not just bought the car. She had bought the whole damn showroom. And the price had been one man's dignity. It was a bargain. The hour that followed was the most surreal, satisfying, and exquisitely awkward hour of my entire life. I was led into a pristine, glass-walled office, the kind usually reserved for the dealership's most valued clients. The manager, a man whose name I learned was Arthur, treated me with the kind of reverential, terrified respect usually reserved for visiting royalty or a tax auditor. He offered me an espresso, which I accepted. He offered me a bottle of sparkling water, which I also accepted. He would have offered me his firstborn child if he thought it would prevent a lawsuit. All the while, through the glass wall of the office, I could see the chaos unfolding in the showroom. The other salespeople were gathered in a hushed, panicked huddle, casting nervous glances in my direction. And Chad, poor, pathetic Chad, he was being spoken to by another, even more senior-looking manager. He wasn't yelling, but his posture was that of a man being systematically, professionally, and utterly dismantled. Chad's face was a mask of pale, sweaty, abject terror. He was watching his career, his arrogance, his entire worldview go up in flames. The transaction itself was ridiculously smooth. I provided the account information for my business, a simple, boringly named LLC that gave no hint of my wealth. Arthur, the manager, made a nervous call to my bank's private client division, and I could see the last vestiges of doubt on his face evaporate as the person on the other end confirmed the funds. He slid the paperwork across the desk to me, his hands trembling slightly. I signed my name with a steady, deliberate hand. "The wire transfer is complete, Miss Chen," he said, his voice a reverent whisper, after a few tense minutes of him staring at his computer screen. "The funds have been received. The car is yours." "Excellent," I said, taking a calm sip of my espresso. "Then I believe we just have one final piece of business to attend to." I stood up and walked back out into the showroom. The huddle of salespeople immediately dispersed, trying to look busy. Arthur followed me, his face a mask of pained obedience. My car was now sitting in the center of the showroom floor, a gleaming midnight blue monument to my victory. It had been given a final, frantic polish. It shone under the spotlights like a black diamond. I saw Chad. He was standing by the reception desk, looking utterly broken. The other senior manager was gone. He looked up as I approached, his eyes filled with a desperate pleading and utterly pathetic hope. The hope that I might relent, that I might have a last-minute change of heart and grant him a sliver of the massive commission he had just lost. I just gave him a small, cold, and utterly final smile. And then I turned to Arthur. "The keys, please," I said, my voice ringing out in the now silent showroom. Arthur, his face a grim mask, held out a small, velvet-lined box. Inside, nestled on the black velvet, were the keys to my new car. They felt heavy, powerful, and deeply, profoundly satisfying in my hand. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, my voice warm for the first time. "It's been a pleasure doing business with you." I walked to the driver's side door of my new car. I opened it, the door swinging upwards with a futuristic, satisfying hiss. I slid into the driver's seat, the handcrafted leather embracing me perfectly. It turned out I did fit. I fit like the car had been custom-made for me. I put the key in the ignition, and I turned it. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural, and obscenely loud sound that filled the entire silent showroom. It was the sound of my victory. It was the sound of my freedom. It was the sound of a fat girl's screw you money, and it was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. I looked out the windshield, and my eyes met Chad's one last time. He was just standing there, a statue of regret, as the tangible, audible, and very expensive proof of his own catastrophic failure idled in front of him. I gave him a small, cheerful little wave, the kind you'd give a passing acquaintance. And then I put the car in gear, and I slowly, majestically, drove my beautiful brand-new supercar right off the showroom floor and out into the bright, sunny afternoon. Driving that car away was a moment of pure, cinematic bliss. The power, the speed, the perfect, elegant engineering. It was everything I had dreamed of. But the joy wasn't just about the car. It was about the moment. It was about the look on Chad's face. It was about the beautiful, elegant, and powerful solution I had found to his ugly, clumsy prejudice. My victory wasn't about the money. The money was just a tool. It was the ammunition. My victory was in the calm. It was in refusing to let him see my pain, in refusing to let him have the satisfaction of my tears or my anger. It was in playing his superficial, materialistic game by a set of rules he didn't even know existed. He had judged me on a set of flawed, surface-level data points, my body, my clothes, and I had responded with a single, irrefutable, and overwhelming data point: my bank balance. In his world, that was the only data that mattered. I had beaten him at his own game. Being fat is not a sin. Being poor is not a sin. But the ugliest, most bankrupting sin of all is the prejudice that lives in the hearts of men like Chad. The lazy, arrogant assumption that you can know a person's worth, their story, their power, just by looking at the shell they inhabit. It is a failure of imagination, a failure of empathy, and a failure of basic human decency. To anyone watching, to anyone who has ever felt that look, that judgment, that dismissal in a store, in a restaurant, in a boardroom, I need you to hear me. Do not internalize their flawed data. Their valuation of you is worthless. Your worth is not determined by the clothes you wear, the car you drive, or the number on a scale. Your worth is something you build, in secret, in the quiet, lonely hours of hard work. It is a fortress you build brick by brick, line of code by line of code, dollar by dollar. And one day, You may not get the chance to buy a supercar, but you will have built something far more valuable. A life of freedom, a life of independence, a life where their judgment is nothing more than the pathetic, irrelevant buzz of a fly in a very, very large room. I drove for hours that day, with no destination, the roar of the engine my victory song. I finally parked at a scenic overlook, the city stretching out below me, and I just sat there, my hands on the wheel of my beautiful, powerful machine. And I laughed. A deep, genuine, and utterly joyful laugh. My life now is a testament to the power of quiet, nerdy, and relentless work. I'm still a software engineer, but now I'm my own boss. I run a small, successful consulting firm, and I'm the primary investor in a handful of women-led tech startups. I am using my screw you money to build a better, more inclusive, and more elegant world. And I still wear my favorite hoodie. Sharing this story with you all, this ridiculous, glorious, and deeply satisfying story, has been a pure joy. For years, I carried the weight of 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000 moments of being underestimated and judged. And today, I got to turn all of that into a single, beautiful knockout punch. You all, this community, you are the people I was driving to meet. You are the ones who understand that the most powerful engine is not a V12. It's a soul that refuses to be devalued. And that is why I need you to join my pit crew. If this story of sweet, high-octane revenge made you cheer, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And please, hit that notification bell, because we are always taking a victory lap. Every subscription is a message to the Chads of the world that their assumptions are about to backfire spectacularly. Now, it's your turn. It's time for you to share your own moment of glory. I want you to go to the comments and tell me about a time you spectacularly defied someone's low expectations of you. What was your wire transfer moment? Share your own story of the ultimate counterpunch. I promise you, I will read every single one. Your stories are the fuel that keeps this whole beautiful machine running. Thank you for coming along for the ride. Thank you for letting me share my joy with you. Remember, the best revenge is not living well. It's living so incredibly, so undeniably well that your very existence becomes a quiet, elegant, and devastating refutation of their entire worldview. Love you all. Your Maya. See you in the next story.